So when Jonathan wrote to ask if I'll be happy to speak at this event, I was reminded of an article I wrote in 2003. 4 years earlier, I received a job at Ben-Gurion University, and I was a young lecturer there. And that was when I think the academic boycott began to kind of gain ground. So we're talking 25 years ago. And so in 2003, I wrote an article, and you can probably Google it, why I'm against the academic boycott. And so what I want to do in the 10 minutes that I have here is offer what I think the two main arguments against the academic boycott, and then argue against myself, okay? If that's okay. So I think there's two arguments against the academic boycott that you'll hear. And we need to know these arguments because we need to respond to these arguments. And the arguments one is a kind of general intellectual argument about the academia and about knowledge exchange and about the importance of knowledge exchange for the development of knowledge. And that is a central argument that you'll see with grant agencies, and you'll see it by the universities when you go and talk with them, our own administrations here in the UK, and ask them to stop partnerships. That's what they're going to tell you. They're going to tell you that the whole culture of academic work is a culture of cooperation and collaboration and in terms of advancing knowledge, okay? The other argument I made then against the academic boycott was that the universities were islands of freedom in Israel. The universities were the spearhead of critical thinking, also critical thinking against the Israeli government. The Israeli government itself doesn't like those in the universities that are critical. And if you support also a notion of change from within, you need to support these academics inside Israel that are against the government and what the government is doing, and an academic boycott will hurt them. So those were basically the two arguments, and I think when I talk with my colleagues, or when I go to Europe and I've gone since October 7th to speak to several university leaders in universities in different countries in Europe to try to convince them to support an academic boycott, these are the two arguments that I've heard back, and these are arguments that I made years ago, so I know them. And so I would like to talk about these. Now, before I talk about these, I want to talk about the demography of Israeli academia, the Jewish demography in Israeli academia, particularly the staff. And I will divide the staff to three groups. One group supports the government. It's not the biggest group probably in the Israeli academia, but it supports the government, it supports its policies, and this includes the genocidal policies in Gaza, but includes supporting the first Nakba, it includes, the settler colonial structure of Israel, and it's a support of that. There's a group of academics that support that. They are not the majority, I think, but they're a substantial group. The majority I would call the liberal Zionist. These are the people that in the 35 weeks before October 7th filled the streets of Tel Aviv every Saturday night against the judicial overhaul. They are not interested in the fact that the Supreme Court of Justice in Israel is a colonial court that does not really respect the rights of Palestinians, but only the rights of Jews. They were fighting for a Jewish democracy. Okay, if such a term exists, I would call it an apartheid democracy, but they were fighting for basic human rights for the Jews. They were not fighting because the same Supreme Court that they were scared that is going to be hit by the Netanyahu government, that same Supreme Court for 70 or so years was stamping on the rights of Palestinians, and there's been many works on that. So that's the big camp in the Israeli academia. And then there's a very small camp of anti-Zionists, okay? And these are people that will go to Masaf Ariata and serve as protective, I don't know how it's called in English, but to protect through direct action the people there. These are people that know what's going on in the West Bank. These are people, when October 7th, when the clampdown immediately on after October 7th against Palestinian students and staff began, these are the only people that voiced any kind of protest against what the universities were doing, while the liberal Zionists and the other Zionists were at the forefront of this clampdown. So if we have a Professor Nader Shalhoub Kevorkian that was wrote a petition against the killing, the slaughtering of children in Gaza. That's her field also of research, unchilding, she calls it. So she wrote a petition, or was among the writers of a petition. She was suspended from the university. She was arrested. She was harassed and violated in prison. And most of the staff members in her department supported what the Israeli government and what the university did to them. And only a very small minority was against it. And that small minority, I would say, supports the academic boycott, even though they're teaching in these universities. Okay? So this is kind of the demography. And indeed, right after October 7th, we saw an immediate clampdown of hundreds of, 150 students, something like that, several staff members, 150 students that were suspended, many of them arrested, some of them underwent torture because of posts they put on Facebook, and often it was Israeli students that were monitoring their Facebook pages and passing on the information to the university authorities and to the police. So this is the kind of situation. Now, the university complicity is twofold. It's both personal, on a personal level of individuals, and it's both structural. And the structural is, I'll give you 3 examples of kind of structural complicity with what is going on. David spoke here a bit before of other examples. I'll just mention 3 examples. One is in the humanities and social sciences. So in the Middle East studies, students are taught Arabic, but they're taught Arabic, and there's been studies about the way Arabic is taught in Middle East studies in Israeli universities. It's not taught for me to have a conversation with Palestinians in the street. It's taught in a certain way that it benefits the intelligence service so that people will later can listen in on phone conversation and so forth. So it's and there's Jonathan Mendel, who wrote his PhD, I think, at Cambridge University, wrote about how Arabic is taught in Middle East Studies Department in the service of security and in the service of domination and surveillance. 2 is archaeology. Archaeology is a field that is basically interested in our history, and what the archaeologists in Israel have done systematically, and of course there are exceptions to this rule, but as a field, it has set to itself a goal to uncover the Jewish past in Palestine and to dig in that way. Now, academically, intellectually, that is a problem because archaeology works in layers, and the idea is you have to go through the layers and see who lived in this land and what cities and what towns and what villages, what they grew. And what the Israeli archaeologists have done systematically is ignored all the layers of Muslim and Palestinian existence in Palestine, hundreds of years of archaeology, in order to dig further to try to find Jewish existence. So again, it's a way of, in the service of politics, in the service of ideology, that there was an existence here and it's a return and it's not a settler colonialism and all that. I have 2 minutes, I'm told. I'll give 2 more. The other one is the sciences, which David talked about, and that is about basically the idea of supporting the military, the surveillance apparatus, and there's several basic sciences that are doing that. And then there's the training of security forces and security officers. My department at Ben-Gurion University, they taught pilots, and I just wanted to, and these are the pilots that killed tens of thousands of people in the first few weeks after October 7th. I'm sure many of them were educated and received their first degree at Ben-Gurion University, but they received their first degree in 1 year. So the university gives them in 3 semesters, winter, spring, and summer, a BA. Okay, so academically, it's a sham. Okay? And it's all a money-making thing with the Air Force, and it's also that the pilots, when they finish pilot schools, they can also say they have a BA. So that's how it works. Each university, it has its own security forces that they train and so forth. I have 1 minute, and I'm going to probably take 2 more. So there is this complicity, and I would like to end with 2 letters and say a word. So the first letter is a letter that came out about a week ago and sent to all the staff members at Hebrew University by the president and provost of Hebrew University right after the 20 hostages were returned, the next morning. And I'll read to you this letter so you get a sense of kind of the atmosphere of what's going on in the university, and then I'll read another letter. Friends and members of the Hebrew University community, after 2 difficult years of pain, worry, and anticipation, the heart finally knows a little comfort. We are excited about the return home of the kidnapped to their families and hope for days of healing and rehabilitation. We will continue to hope for the return of all the deceased kidnapped. Even on this day of joy and relief, we remember with heavy hearts the civilians and soldiers who were murdered and killed in the war, their families whose tragedy has no cure, and the thousands of injured in body and soul. We cherish the combatants and the members of the security forces who sacrificed their lives in the longest war in the country's history. Among the forces who served are about 8,000. Among the forces who served, about 8,000 were our students whose heroism will be engraved in our hearts forever, and we thank all those who still protect us every day. These days, the feeling of joy is mixed with a feeling of sadness, along with a lot of hope for the future. Even at this time, we at the Hebrew University community are required to look ahead and fulfill our commitment to building a better future, a future of reconciliation, of research, innovation, and development, of academic cooperation in Israel and around the world, and of promoting a space that enables a better reality for future generations. So we have 2 years of war, we have a genocide, we have what was called here scholasticide or edgicide. Every single university was destroyed, 85% of the schools were destroyed. We know the numbers that were killed, and not a word about Gaza, not a word about the suffering in Gaza, not a word about any. It's all about us being the victims after 2 years. This is the atmosphere at Hebrew University. And Hebrew University is among the better ones. And I'll finish with another letter, the final letter, a shorter one paragraph. It's not a letter, it's a report. And it is the answer to the argument of collaboration, that institutions need to collaborate and that knowledge exchange and so forth against the academic boycott. And it's a paragraph written by the American Association of University Professors, the most important professional association of university professors in the United States or in North America. And this is what they explain. The AAU, and they revised their policy in 2024. They were against an academic boycott until 2024, and this is what they explain in the revised policy. The AAUP revised policy maintains that academic boycotts are not in themselves violations of academic freedom and can instead be legitimate tactical responses to conditions that are fundamentally incompatible with the mission of higher education. The statement recognizes that when faculty members choose to support academic boycotts, they can legitimately seek to protect and advance academic freedom and fundamental rights of colleagues and students who are living and working under circumstances that violate academic freedom and one or more of those rights. In such contexts, academic boycotts are not in themselves violations of academic freedom. And I'll end with that. Thank you.